He'd been on my trail for 40 days. I knew it by the third. There's a particular way a good tracker moves through country. Not fast, not urgent. Methodical, like water finding the path of least resistance through stone. I'd seen it before, in men who were paid well for that patience. Men who'd learned that a wanted man will always make the same mistake eventually. He'll sleep somewhere warm. He'll eat somewhere bright. He'll stop at a water source one day too long. I'd made none of those mistakes, but I'd let him think I had. The first week he found my cold camps. Ashes still faintly dark, the kind of dark that tells a man the fire was out 12 hours, not 36. He'd crouch over those ashes with 2 fingers pressed into the earth, reading me like a page out of scripture. I could picture his face from half a mile up the ridgeline. That small, satisfied nod when a man thinks he's closing the distance. He was good, I won't lie to you. He was the best tracker I'd come up against in 20 years of living sideways from the law. But good isn't always enough. And 40 days is a long time to be sure of yourself. His name was Elias Cobb. He was 43 years old. He had a wife in Abilene he wrote letters to. I found out later he carried a photograph of her tucked into the band of his hat. He had been a sheriff's deputy for 11 years before the money and private bounty work pulled him away. He had never, in 12 years of bounty hunting, failed to bring a man in, dead or alive. That last part mattered, because the price on my head had a preference. They wanted me dead. The bounty was set in Tucson. Posted in the spring of 1883, when the desert was just starting to show its teeth, and the night still carried enough chill to remind you that the world hadn't entirely forgotten winter. The man who posted it was called Harold Vance. He ran a freight operation, legitimate on the surface, the kind of surface that takes a careful man several weeks to scratch through. Underneath the freight was a water rights scheme that had already strangled 3 small ranches in the Gila Valley. Underneath the water rights scheme was a land grab so precisely constructed it looked almost admirable. The way a scorpion can look almost beautiful if you're not thinking about the tail. I'd interfered with Harold Vance's business, not because I was paid to. I never explained to him why. There are things a man does because the alternative is to look at himself in a creek reflection one morning and not recognize what's looking back. I had let that happen once in my life, a long time ago, in a different territory, to a different version of me. I didn't intend to let it happen again. The 3 ranchers in the Gila Valley had families. The families had children. The children had nothing to do with any of it. I'd seen the youngest, a girl, maybe 6 years old, sitting in the dust outside a house that was 3 weeks from being taken. She was playing with a tin cup, using it like a cup and a doll and a boat all at once, the way children do when they don't have much else. I'd spoken to Harold Vance, once, clearly. He hadn't listened, so I'd removed his ability to ignore me. The how of that is its own story, one I won't get into now. What matters is what came after. Harold Vance, with 2 fingers broken on his right hand, and a freight ledger gone missing and 3 water deals collapsed, reaching into the deep pocket of his fury and pulling out $5,000. $5,000. Dead preferred. That was a significant sum in 1883. Enough to retire a working man. Enough to make an ambitious man set aside whatever he was already doing and start packing his saddlebags. Enough to draw Elias Cobb out of Abilene and put him on the road south toward the Gila with that photograph tucked into his hatband and 12 years of perfect record walking beside him like a shadow. The wanted poster called me the Drifter. They didn't know my name. Nobody knows my name. The first week I was in New Mexico. I could feel the search starting. That particular tightening in the air that a hunted man learns to sense the way certain animals sense weather. I made my camps careless on purpose. Not sloppy enough to be obvious, just sloppy enough to be human. He found the first camp on day 4. I watched him from a cedar bluff while he worked the ground. He moved like a man solving a puzzle, unhurried, precise, each piece examined before being set aside. He found the heel print I'd left pressed deliberately deep in the soft soil near the creek bank. He found the ring of stones where I'd built a fire 2 nights before. He stood up slowly and looked north. I was already northwest, but I turned north for the next 3 days. Let him read the story I wanted him to read. By the end of the second week, he was 2 days behind me. I was leading him through country I knew, and he didn't. The broken canyon land east of the Mogollon Rim, where the rock throws echoes in strange directions and a man can lose his sense of sound the same way he might lose his sense of direction in fog. He camped harder those nights. I could tell by the way the fire traces showed in the morning. A tired man doesn't bank his coals as carefully. He was working. By the 3rd week, doubt started to grow in him. I could see it in the tracks he left behind. I'm telling you, you can read a man's state of mind from how his horse moves. Confident men on confident horses push forward. Uncertain men hold back. Their horses feel it in the reins and respond accordingly. His horse's front hooves started showing shorter stride impressions. The spacing told the story. He'd started to wonder, not whether he'd find me. He was too professional for that. He was wondering whether something about this trail was wrong. Whether the signs were too consistent, whether a man who'd survived as long as I had would really be this readable. Smart man, Elias Cobb, but he kept coming. Because $5,000 and 12 years of reputation are a powerful combination. And because men like him aren't built to stop. Stopping isn't in the architecture of who they are. Day 23. I left him a different kind of sign. Not a camp, not a heel print. I left the cold remnants of a small meal. Hardtack wrapper, the wire wrap from a piece of salt beef. Placed too neatly. Just slightly too deliberate in its casualness. The kind of thing that might be careless, or might be deliberate. And a man can't know which unless he already knows which. I wanted the doubt to bloom. I wanted it to fill his chest the way water fills a boot when you're crossing a winter stream. Not enough to stop him, just enough to slow his certainty. Day 30, he crossed into Arizona. The desert received him the way the desert receives everyone. Without opinion, without accommodation. Just heat and silence, and the long, flat arithmetic of distance. He'd been riding 20 days through hard country. His water discipline was good. I could tell from the supply signs. He'd found my cached positions twice, where I'd left evidence of refilling. He mapped my water habits. He thought he knew me. On day 37, he started to gain real ground. He'd worked out my general direction of travel with enough precision that he stopped reading the individual signs and started reading the landscape instead. That's a different level of skill. When a tracker stops following prints and starts following geography, following the land itself, asking it where a man would go, not where a man had gone. I respect that. I always have. Day 39, he was less than 6 hours behind me. I rode to a canyon mouth 12 miles east of a town called Seco Wells, found a flat-faced stone wall that caught the afternoon light, and I sat down with my back against it and waited. Day 40. He rode around a red rock outcropping and stopped his horse 30 feet from where I sat. Let me tell you what that moment feels like. Not from his side, I'll get there. From mine. You sit and wait for a man who has spent 40 days hunting you. The desert is quiet in the way the desert is always quiet. Not empty, but indifferent. A raven worked a thermal somewhere above the canyon rim. The wind moved through a stand of ocotillo and made a sound like cards being shuffled. My horse, ground-tied 20 feet to the left, didn't react when Cobb's horse came around the rock. That told me something about both horses and something about how Cobb was riding. Controlled. Controlled even in the moment of finding. I had my hands flat on my knees, not near the guns. I wanted him to see that first. I wanted his eyes to read the position of my hands before they read anything else. Because a man who finds what he's been looking for 40 days, his first instinct is the gun. And I didn't want his first instinct. I wanted his second thought. He was good. He didn't draw. He stopped the horse and he looked at me the way a man looks at a mathematical problem he'd been sure he had solved and is now not entirely certain about. I said, "You move better than most." He said nothing. His eyes went to my hands, then to the 2 Colts on my hips. I want to explain something about those guns. Not their history, that's for another story. I want to explain what they communicate to a man who knows guns. They aren't display weapons. They aren't the kind of hardware a young man straps on to feel tall. They are working tools that have been worked. The grips are worn smooth in exactly the places that tell a man who handles firearms where the hand sits, where the draw is, where the movement comes from. The leather of the holsters is shaped by years of use. Dark where the oil from the hand contacts it, light where it doesn't. They are weapons that belong to a man who draws them like breathing. Not fast for the sake of fast. Fast because the motion has been repeated so many thousands of times that hesitation has been removed from it entirely. Elias Cobb looked at those 2 guns and understood all of that in about 4 seconds. His hand, which had been resting on his thigh close to his own iron, moved very slowly to the saddle horn. That was the moment. Not the 40 days, not the desert, not the $5,000. That small, deliberate movement of a hand from one place to another. That was the entire story compressed into a gesture. I watched his face while it happened. There's a particular look a man gets when he understands something clearly for the first time that he should have understood already. It isn't fear exactly. Fear is a simpler thing. It runs in the eyes and the jaw. This was something more complicated than fear. This was recognition. The recognition of having been brought to a specific place by a specific sequence of events that had all been arranged by the man he was looking at. He had followed me for 40 days. And in that moment, sitting 30 feet away in the afternoon light with his hand moving quietly to the saddle horn, he understood that I had led him, that I had shaped the trail, that every cold camp, every careless heel print, every piece of hardtack wrapper had been a sentence and a message. And the message was, here, this place, this moment, on my terms, not yours. I was told, he said slowly, that you were a dangerous man. I said, whoever told you that was being accurate. He looked at me for a long time, long enough for the raven above the canyon to cry once and fold its wings and drop out of sight. The man who posted the bounty, he said, Harold Vance. Yes, I said. He told me dead was preferred. I'm aware, I said. The horse moved slightly under him and he steadied it with one hand. The other hand stayed on the saddle horn. He was thinking hard. You could see it in the focus of his eyes, the way everything else had gone still. Why'd you let me find you? He asked. It was the right question. It was the only question that mattered at that point. I looked at him steadily. I looked at the photograph-shaped shadow in the band of his hat. I looked at the wear on his boots and the quality of his equipment and the way he sat his horse. Not like a young man proving something, but like a man who has been doing something for a long time and does it well. Because I wanted you to have a choice, I said. Men in your line of work don't always get one. Usually it happens too fast. I wanted you to have time to make a decision. He stared at me. The decision, I said, is whether this is the job you want your wife to get a letter about. The color changed in his face. It wasn't shame. I didn't intend it as shame. It was clarity. The word wife arriving in that moment with its full weight, cutting through 12 years of professional pride and $5,000 of motivation with the simplicity of a sharp blade. How do you know about... I've been watching you for 40 days, I said. You've been tracking me. I've been reading you. That's the other thing about this trail that you almost understood and didn't quite. He took that in. I let the silence carry it. Then I said, go back to Abilene. Tell Vance you couldn't find me. The territory's big. It happens. He sat there for another full minute. I counted it roughly by the raven, which had appeared again above the south wall of the canyon, turning slow circles in the last of the afternoon heat. Then Elias Cobb did something that told me everything I needed to know about the kind of man he was. He took the photograph out of his hat band. He looked at it. He put it back. He turned his horse without a word. He rode south. I watched until the sound of his horse faded into the dry air and the canyon gave back its silence. The raven circled twice more and then it too was gone. I sat there a while longer, not because I was tired, because that kind of moment deserves a little stillness, a little respect for what it actually was. Two men who could have killed each other choosing differently. That choice doesn't always come around. When it does, a man ought to honor it with at least a few minutes of quiet. I heard later, a season and a half later, through the kind of channels that carry information in the territories like wind carries seeds, that Elias Cobb went back to Abilene. He never returned to bounty work. He took a position as a town marshal in a small settlement in central Kansas, a place quiet enough that his wife could keep a garden and he could sleep through the nights. I don't know if that was because of that afternoon in the canyon. Maybe he'd already been tired of the work and just needed a reason. Maybe that moment with two Colts and a direct question about his wife was the thing that shifted the weight from one side to the other. I'll never ask him. Some things aren't for asking. What I know is that Harold Vance eventually ran out of people willing to take his money. Men talk in the territories. They talk in the saloons and at the water stops and in the camps. Word moves. Word about a $5,000 bounty on a man who can't be brought in, who has been tracked by the best and has nothing to show for it except trackers who come back quiet and don't say much about what they saw. That kind of word is its own protection. The water rights scheme in the Gila Valley collapsed 2 years later under a different kind of pressure, the legal kind, brought by men with the patience to work through papers instead of lead. The three ranching families kept their land. The girl with the tin cup grew up in a house that stayed standing. I heard that too later. I don't know if it's entirely true, but I chose to believe it. That's its own kind of choice. People ask, or they would if they knew enough to ask, why I didn't just kill Elias Cobb. The mathematics of survival seem to point in that direction. A tracker that good, allowed to live, is a tracker that could try again, or sell information, or tell the wrong person about a canyon east of Seco Wells. Here's what I know about men like Elias Cobb. They have a code. It may not be the same code as mine, and it may express itself through a bounty hunter's ledger rather than a drifter's instincts, but it's a code. Men with genuine codes don't betray direct conversations. A man who looked me in the eye in that canyon and was given a choice, that man doesn't go back to Tucson and sell what he knows. If he'd been a different kind of man, the kind who operates without a code, the kind who'd have drawn the moment he came around that rock, the story ends differently. But I'd read 40 days of his trail. I knew what kind of man he was before he stopped his horse. That's the thing about reputation. Real reputation. Not the legend, not the poster, not the $5,000 number. Real reputation is built from exactly these moments. Not from how fast a man draws. Not from the count of those he's put in the ground. Real reputation is built from the accuracy of a man's judgment. From the number of times he correctly read a situation and responded to what it actually was, rather than what it looked like. Elias Cobb was worth more alive and walking back to Abilene than he was dead in that canyon. The three ranch families were worth more alive in their houses than Harold Vance was worth whatever satisfaction his ruined freight ledger might have given me. The girl with the tin cup was worth more than any of the rest of it. That's the code, if you're looking for it stated plain. The code is that some things matter more than the clean resolution of a problem. Some lives weigh more in the balance than your own certainty about how a thing should end. Knowing which is which. That's what it means to be truly dangerous. Not the guns, not the speed, not the 40 days of leading a man through canyon country like threading a needle, the knowing. That canyon east of Seco Wells doesn't look like anything if you ride past it. Red rock, Ocotillo, a flat-faced stone wall that catches the afternoon light. There's no marker, no reason to stop, but something happened there. Two men in a desert, a choice made, and the weight of it settling quietly into the stone the way water settles into the cracks over centuries. Slowly, without announcement. The territories hold those moments. Long after the men who made them have moved on, the land holds them. I think about that sometimes, about what the land keeps that people can't. The land doesn't editorialize. It doesn't decide who is right. It just holds the shape of what happened, the way stone holds the shape of water that has long since moved on. That suits me. I've never needed anyone to decide who was right. I just needed the girl with the tin cup to keep playing in the dust outside her house on land that was still her family's. That's enough. That's always been enough. Now I want to hear from you. When Elias Cobb turned his horse and rode south, he never said a word in response to what I told him. Not a word. He just moved. What do you think he was thinking in that last minute? And that one line I said to him, I wanted you to have a choice. Was that mercy, or was it something else? Leave your answer in the comments. I read every one. The people who find their way to these stories tend to think about them differently than most, and I want to know what you see. If this story found something in you, that instinct that says some things are worth sitting still for, then you belong here. Subscribe. New stories come when they're ready, not before. There's no schedule for this kind of thing. The next story involves a town that hired a man to protect it from me. 12 armed men, a written contract, and a problem they didn't fully understand yet. That story is coming. Wait for it.